Hello, I'm Helen of Sunflower Cottage Crochet, and today I'm going to be showing you how to do this cute V-stitch ripple. Now we'll be working up this washcloth today, but I do also have this pattern available as a blanket. So this is the preemie size blanket that I did. You can see it's a very pretty stitch, and it's actually much easier than it looks. So if you come and join me in my workspace, we'll start working on the washcloth. Okay, so to start the V-stitch ripple washcloth, I've chained 44, and then what we're going to do is double crochet in the third chain from the hook. So there's 1, 2, 3. This chain here we're going to double crochet. So that chain 2 that started counts as a double crochet 2 together with this particular double crochet. So then we're going to skip 2 and then we're going to V-stitch. Now for the purposes of this pattern, the V-stitch is worked as a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, all in the same stitch. So there's my double crochet, chain 1, and in that same stitch we'll work another double crochet. You can see that. And then we're going to skip 2 stitches, and then in the third stitch we're going to work a V-stitch, which is a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, and then we're going to chain 1 and we're going to work another V-stitch in that same chain. So this is going to create one of the peaks of the ripple. As we are creating a zigzag ripple effect, your starting chain, mine was 10 inches, will not be the finished measurement of your washcloth. You're going to find that because we're creating the peaks and the troughs, or the valleys and the peaks, however you want to call them, because we are creating that zigzag effect, it will automatically reduce the width of your washcloth. So there's our first, what I'm going to call peak, done. Then we're going to skip the next 2 chains, and in the third chain we're going to work just a plain V-stitch. So we will double crochet, chain 1 and double crochet all into that same stitch, and then we're going to create a valley. So we're going to skip the next 2 stitches, chain's twisted itself, and in that third stitch we're going to yarn over, insert our hook, yarn over and pull through. Then we'll yarn over and pull through 2 loops on our hook. We're not going to finish this double crochet. We're going to skip the next chain, and in the next chain after that we're going to start working our double crochet. So we'll yarn over, insert our hook, yarn over and pull through. So you'll notice at this point we have 4 loops on our hook. Yarn over, pull through 2, and then we'll yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on our hook, and that is how we're working our double crochet 2 together. But it's over 3 stitches because we've got that one in the middle that we didn't do anything with. And then we'll skip the next 2 chains, and in the third chain we'll work a V-stitch. So that's a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, all in that same stitch. And then we'll skip the next 2 stitches, and in that third stitch we will work a V-stitch, chain 1, V-stitch, all in that same stitch, all in that same chain. So there's my first V-stitch, chain 1, and we'll V-stitch. and then we'll skip the next 2 stitches and we'll work a V-stitch in the next chain. And then we'll skip the next 2 and we're going to do our double crochet 2 together over the next 3 stitches. So we'll skip 2, we'll wrap our yarn, insert our hook into that 3rd chain, wrap our yarn and pull through, wrap our yarn, pull through 2 loops on our hook, and we'll leave these 2 loops on our hook. We'll wrap our yarn, we will skip the next chain and we'll work into the chain following that. So we'll insert our hook, wrap our yarn and pull it through. So now we've got 4 loops on our hook. We'll wrap our yarn, pull through 2. So now we've got 3 loops on our hook, and we'll wrap our yarn and pull through all 3 loops on our hook. And then we'll skip the next 2 chains and we'll work a V-stitch into the next chain. And then we'll skip the next 2 chains and we'll work our peak, which is a V-stitch, chain 1 V-stitch, all into that same chain. So there's my first V-stitch, chain 1, V-stitch, and then we'll skip 2 chains and we'll work a V-stitch into the next chain. And then we'll skip the next 2 chains and that leaves us with the last 2, and we're going to do a double crochet 2 together just across these 2 chains. So I've worked the first part, and I'm going to wrap my yarn, and I'm not skipping a stitch because this is the last 2 stitches, and I'll work the second part of the double crochet 2 together. There we go, and you can see how that 10 inches that we started with as the chain has now reduced, and if I just grab my tape measure, so it's about 7.5 inches. Now, in order to show you how to do the ripple properly, I'm going to change colour. So actually where I've done that last pull through, I'm going to pull it out and finish off that stitch with my next colour yarn, which is the cream. And then from here, this V ripple stitch actually gets a lot easier. We're going to chain 2 and turn. Now this is the same for every subsequent row, so this row will be repeated. So this chain 2 counts as the start of a double crochet 2 together. So then we'll wrap our yarn over, insert our hook into the next chain 1 space, so into the middle of the very next V stitch here. Wrap our yarn and pull through. Then we'll wrap our yarn, pull through 2 loops, wrap our yarn and pull through 2 loops. And then basically working across this row, we're only working into the chain 1 spaces of each V-stitch and the chain 1 at the top of the peak. So in the next V-stitch, chain 1, this one here, we'll work a V-stitch, and then in the chain 1 space but between the 2 V-stitches that made that peak, we're going to do a V-stitch, chain 1, V-stitch. So there's the first V-stitch, then I'm going to chain 1, and in that same space I'm going to do another V-stitch. And what that does is it just maintains the peak. You can see that. And then in this next chain 1 space of the next V-stitch, we're going to work a V-stitch, and then to maintain the valley, which is the dip, in the next chain 1 space, I don't know whether you can see that, but we've got another V-stitch here. So in the chain 1 space of this V-stitch, we're going to do the first part of our double crochet 2 together. So we'll wrap our yarn around our hook, we'll insert it into that chain 1 space, and we'll wrap our yarn and pull through. Then we'll wrap our yarn and pull through 2 loops on our hook. And then what we're going to do is we're going to completely ignore this double crochet 2 together from the row below, and we're going to look for that next chain 1 space of the V-stitch. So we'll ignore these and we're going to work into the chain 1 space here. We're going to wrap our yarn, insert our hook into that space, wrap our yarn and pull through, wrap our yarn, pull through 2 loops on our hook, wrap our yarn, pull through all 3 loops on our hook. And then we'll look for the next chain 1 space and we're going to do a V-stitch. And in the next chain 1 space, because that's the top of the peak, we're going to work a V-stitch, chain 1, V-stitch. So there's my first V done, chain 1, and V-stitch. And then in the next chain 1 space, we're going to work a V-stitch, and in the next chain 1 space, I don't know if I show you. So now we're at the valley again. So we're going to work our double crochet 2 together across the chain 1 space of the next V-stitch. We'll ignore the double crochet 2 together from the previous row, and in the next chain 1 space, which is here, we're going to work the second part of the double crochet 2 together. So in the first chain 1 space, we'll insert our hook and start the process of that double crochet 2 together, and then we'll skip that double crochet 2 together, and in the next chain 1 space we will work the second part of our double crochet 2 together. and then we're looking for that next chain one space, and we're going to work a V-stitch, and then that next chain one space we'll work a V-stitch, chain one, V-stitch, and then in that next chain one space we will work a V-stitch, and then we'll reach the end, and in that last chain one space we will wrap our yarn around our hook, insert it into the chain one space, wrap yarn and pull it through, wrap yarn and pull through 2 loops on your hook, and then we're going to wrap the yarn around the hook, and we're going to go into that final stitch, insert our hook, wrap our yarn and pull it through, so we have 4 loops on our hook, wrap our yarn, pull through 2 loops, wrap our yarn and pull through 3 loops. But if you're changing colour, change colour before you do that final pull through. So I will snip off the cream and work the green, and then we're literally just repeating that second row all the way up until our washcloth is square. So we'll chain 2, which counts as our first half of the double crochet 2 together. We're looking for that first chain 1 space, and we'll wrap our yarn, insert our hook into the first chain 1 space, wrap our yarn and pull through. So we've got 3 loops on our hook, wrap our yarn, pull through 2 loops, wrap our yarn, pull through 2 loops. And there is a very definite pattern to this if you haven't noticed. Each row starts and ends with a double crochet 2 together, and then you're working only into the chain 1 spaces all the way across the row. So in the next chain 1 space you do a V-stitch, and then you hit the peak. So in that chain 1 space at the top of the peak you'll work a V-stitch, chain 1, V-stitch. In the next chain 1 space you'll work a V-stitch, and then you'll do double crochet 2 together across the next 2 V-stitches. So you ignore the valleys and just work into the chain 1 spaces, and then in the next chain 1 space you'll do a V-stitch, and then you hit the peak. So then you'll work a V-stitch, chain 1, V-stitch, and in the next chain 1 space you'll work a V-stitch, and then we're back to a double crochet 2 together across the next 2 chain 1 spaces, and you work that all the way along. So I've worked my first double crochet 2 together, so I'm looking at the next chain 1 space that's available to me, which is this one, and I'll be working a V-stitch. And then the next chain 1 space I'll be working a V-stitch, chain 1, V-stitch, because it's the peak. And then in the next chain 1 space I'll be working a V-stitch. And then across the next 2 chain 1 spaces, which is this one and this one, we'll be working a double crochet 2 together. and then we'll V-stitch in the next chain 1 space. And then we'll V-stitch, chain 1, V-stitch in that top of the peak. And then we'll V-stitch in the next chain 1 space. And then we'll double crochet 2 together across the next 2 chain 1 spaces, which is this one and this one. We're ignoring the double crochet 2 together from the previous row. And then we'll V-stitch into the next chain 1 space. And we will V-stitch, chain 1, V-stitch into the next chain 1 space. And we will V-stitch into the next chain 1 space. And then across the last chain 1 space and the top of the double crochet 2 together that we started the previous row with, we're going to do a double crochet 2 together. So we'll insert, wrap our yarn around our hook, insert it into that next chain 1 space, wrap our yarn and pull through, and then we'll wrap our yarn and pull through 2 loops on our hook. We'll wrap our yarn around our hook again, and we'll insert our hook into the top of that next stitch, wrap our yarn and pull through, wrap our yarn, pull through 2 loops. If you're changing colour, do so here before you finish the stitch. Otherwise you can go ahead and wrap your yarn and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. And that is how you do the V-stitch ripple. You would literally repeat that row until your washcloth or your project is as big as required or desired. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial today. If you have, please feel free to hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon to be notified of any updates that I may make to the channel. Take care, and I'll see you soon.